One of the things too is people always said when you couldn't sell, you went into management. And I disagree with that because I was very good in what I did. We won all the trips, but I had just a passion to help people grow and develop, be a lid lifter, which was one of Maxwell's topics. So when you have poor leadership and you really want to grow, you'll go out and figure it out on your own. My youngest calls it the FIO muscle, the figure it out muscle.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he got that, but it really makes a lot of sense. If you really want to grow, there are resources out there, and there's more resources today than there's ever been.
From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry, Brian Covey has shown what it takes to find your competitive edge. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. Find your competitive edge with Brian Covey.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge. So our guest today is a friend of mine. I actually got to help recommend his book, write a story about how much it impacted me, because Lance Welch, our guest today, not only 30 years in corporate America, dad of 3, he's been married over 30 years. He is what I would say the modern day leader, and he's actually bringing in what was people call old school with the new school. And he's a speaker, he's an author, he's a coach. You're going to listen today because not only leadership principles, but anybody that's been married that long, raised 3 boys, and done what he has done, there's obviously wisdom and lessons within that. So if you're a parent, if you're not a parent, if you're a business leader, entrepreneur, all of you are going to want to take notes today as we dive through this. Talk about his book, because The Legacy Navigator was one that I got a chance to pre-read and share some of the stories, some of the things we'll share today, but also some of the framework that's going to help you build your own legacy as you go through. So without further ado, welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, I'm excited. I got to say, this is one I've been preparing for, because when Rod Lovelace, just kind of tee up Rod, introduced us years ago, our Allstate agent, and you obviously will talk about some of that story.
It was 6 years ago. Do you realize that?
Was it really?
It's been 6 years.
Wow. That's when you guys moved here?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's jump and give a little people a background, because 30 years corporate America, I'm not there yet, but I know spending some years in corporate America, you probably learned a lot of lessons as you went through that. I always want to know, what was maybe one of the best lessons you learned as you were leading a team, and maybe give people a little vantage into what your role was and what you were doing.
Man, there were a lot of lessons. Some were good, not so good. All of them, though, transferred into dad lessons. And so when we talk about what we learn in corporate, every one of them, I was able to take it and spin it over to how do my boys benefit from this? So this is one of the lessons I always gave them, is every leader you have is absolutely for your benefit. Some will be wonderful leaders that you'll want to replicate. Others will be horrible leaders that you will never want to replicate. And both of those mean it's for your good.
I love that. Well, I think back, right when you said that, I'm thinking, okay, I know great leaders that I've had, and also know one's very similar to that. Best leader for you, don't have to say who it was, but what was maybe a lesson that you learned from one of the best, one of the greats?
And I'd be happy to use his name. He's here local. He is retired. His name is Steve Welch. Great leader, one of the good ones that I had in the corporate side. But one of the things he's always said was, when you can't change people, you have to change people. Because I had a problem with releasing people, terminating people, and at a corporate level, it was really hard to do anyway. But he was like, you can't change and fix everybody, because I have this tendency to think I can. And he was like, Lance, at some point when you realize you can't change people, you got to change people.
I love that. Well, I'll be the first one to admit, struggled with that, especially as a new manager. And so for any of the new leaders out there listening, hopefully they're listening and going, they all think, and I know I was in that camp, I thought I could change people. Like, well, if I spend enough time, if I work hard enough, I can change their beliefs, I can change this. So if you can't change the people, you need to make the change.
Yep.
What's something you learn? I want to piggyback on that, because knowing that I struggled, and I hear this from people all the time, is, Brian, I got people on my team, they're not performing. I don't think they're ever going to come along. They don't fit our standard, I hear. What's some of the things that you look back and you go, okay, this is where I did it right? And when you had to change people, it's hard. What's some advice you would give people if they need to make a change on their team?
One thing that I definitely realized is, if they are not performing well, they're not happy either. And the best thing I can do is release them from where they're not doing well to go do something where they are. So that was one of them. And I can think of 2 specifically that in my zeal to earn a bonus, this was self-serving, but we would get paid a bonus if we hit certain recruiting standards.
Yeah.
And there was one year that I won't give the number because it was a really nice number, but I was 2 people away. They checked every box. They accommodated everything that was required of them. But in my gut, I'm like, I don't think this is going to be a great fit. And my gut was right. And it took 2 years of having them on the team before I could get them to move on. But it was like they were the highest maintenance, lowest producers on the team. And they weren't happy. They weren't making good money. They were impacting my overall team's numbers. So it's like, that was just an amazing lesson that, do things for the right reasons. That wasn't the right reason to bring them in. And, so that was on me as a young leader.
Oh, I can relate. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he's going through something similar. And I'll say he's in corporate today at a large bank. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And we were having the conversation the other day. He goes, I don't know what to do with this person. They're not performing, but they're sitting in the seat. They're not growing. And it's all the things you talked about. Like, they're not moving forward. They're not accomplishing what they want. And he's like, how do I get through it? And it took you 2 years on that.
Yeah.
He's similarly there. And so I think it's great advice, though, as you say, is like, don't let the compensation or some of those guide you and you go through.
Yep.
I love to know the flip side. So we talk about the great leaders and what they taught you, which I love that one about change. And I think that's going to help people because I know I've been in that situation. What's maybe one of those leaders that wasn't the best? What did you learn from them when they weren't performing or not really doing something? You go, I don't want to be that one. I don't want to be like them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of those in corporate. At a corporate level, there's the law of attrition seems to kick in. The really, really good leaders had a tendency to get picked away. They were captured and promoted into another company, right? Yeah. They were poached. Yeah. The not so good leaders, if they stuck around long enough, they tended to get promoted. And so there was a lot of challenges with that. So the lesson on that was, if I wanted to be a good leader in the corporate level, nothing against the corporation I was with, but I had to invest in myself. So that's where my relationship with John Maxwell started back in the late 80s, early 90s was, coaching wasn't a thing back then. And I had to go out and find it for myself. I wanted to be a great leader. One of the things too is people always said, when you couldn't sell, you went into management. And I disagree with that because I was very good in what I did. We won all the trips, but I had just a passion to help people grow and develop, be a lid lifter, which was one of Maxwell's topics. So when you have poor leadership and you really want to grow, you'll go out and figure it out on your own. My youngest calls it the FIO muscle, the figure it out muscle. Yeah. And I don't know where he got that, but it really makes a lot of sense. If you really want to grow, there are resources out there, and there's more resources today than there's ever been. Isn't there?
Yeah, you mentioned John Maxwell. I know we're both students, and his newest book came out. I'm still working my way through it, and I'm going, wow, timely. Listened to a podcast last week with him and Ed, and I'm going, okay, there's so much there. Are there any of his lessons? I always love to pick those out. John Maxwell, that you look like, law of attrition there, but like any others that you go, okay, this is one I took and I'm kind of embodying or want to be like.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a book. I've probably read, 20, 30 of his books. I mean, he's got a lot. Yeah. In a speech that he gave when I was going through the certification process for coaching with him, he made a comment, and he made it almost flippantly, like it wasn't a big deal. He was just having a conversation. It's like there's just gold that comes out of him. Yeah. But he made a comment that I have used so many times. I've turned it into some coaching pieces, but he just simply said, consistency compounds. You've probably seen that on some of my posts and different things, because whatever you do on a consistent basis will compound. So think about it. If it's a positive, that's going to compound into something better. If it's a negative habit or a behavior, and you do that on a consistent basis, that's also going to compound. So that's one of those phrases. It applies everywhere. Business, home, parenting, marriage. It's everywhere.
I love that one. Consistency compounds.
And so simple. 2 words.
He's like literally the guru of those, where you go, man, that is so simple. And I heard him share this on the podcast. I love your take on this. He goes, people think I just come up with these, right? Like I'm just walking around and God just drops these amazing phrases. He goes, truthfully, it's sometimes 45 minutes, an hour, hours, days. And I'm writing it, I'm rewriting it, I'm rewriting as I go through. For you, as you've built out your coaching practice and you've got that there as a coach, are there things that you do, because you mentioned personal development. Where I'm going with this is, you appear, as I study you and kind of get prepared for it, you're a student of the game still. After all these years, like I can tell you're a learner. Are there things that you've learned that have helped you be consistent in your own personal development?
Yeah, and the lifelong learning, it's what I've always told my boys, until the coffin lid closes, I'm learning. I'm going to be growing, doing something intentional. There's something that he talked about 30 years ago, maybe whatever it was, but he has a thinking chair. Have you heard him talk about his thinking chair? So I captured a combination of his thinking chair and then Keith Cunningham's book, The Road Less Stupid, where he has his thinking time. So I've kind of merged those two concepts, and with all my clients, they have a VIP time. Every week, they're expected to have at least one 1-hour meeting with the VIP, and the VIP is themselves.
Nice.
So you think about if you have an appointment if you and I have an appointment Thursday afternoon, 2:00, and you no-show, what does that tell me about how you perceive me adding value to your life or not?
Not good at all.
Not good at all. If you set a VIP meeting with yourself, which is thinking time, and in your thinking time, and there's a series of questions that I help you with, if you no-show yourself, even at a subconscious level, you're telling yourself, you're not that valuable. Your time isn't valuable. Your worth isn't there. It's not worth sticking to and keeping that appointment. So all my folks, it's a combination, again, from his thinking chair, which he says when he gets up from his desk and starts walking to his chair, his mind it's like Pavlov's dogs.
Yeah.
It knows we're going into thinking mode. And his greatest ideas have come from there. Now, he'll also tell you 80% of his ideas that he thought were multi-million-dollar ideas went nowhere.
Yeah.
But if you don't spend any time in intentional thinking time, where does that leave you? You're now reacting instead of responding to things.
That's right. Yeah, big difference. Hey guys, it's Brian here. I hope you are enjoying the show. By the way, if you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur looking to grow your personal brand, make a bigger impact, maybe increase your leads and grow your revenue, let's help you get started today by connecting up with my friends over at the Brand Builders Group. You've heard me talk about them, but if you're new here, this is definitely the first step to get you started in turning your reputation into revenue. Head over to freebrandcall.com/Brian Covey. Again, to set up your free brand call, go to freebrandcall.com/Brian Covey to set up a free strategy call with one of the team at Brand Builders, and they will dive into your specific goals for how you want to grow your personal brand. I can't wait to hear how it goes. Walk me through this, because you talked about the producer to leader or manager. You know, people use that sometimes. They're different, but they use them interchangeably. But I know you were a producer and then you move into leadership. A lot of conversations lately with this, especially in the mortgage real estate space, and people are producing like, well, do I go build a team? Can I do this, or do I still produce and try to do that? What was your journey like going through that of being a producer and then that shift?
Yeah, it was a challenge, because when I first made that shift, I was probably 28, 29 years old, and I was taking over a market that had agents that had been in business longer than I'd been alive.
Wow.
You know, so earning the right to speak into their lives was a definite challenge. And I can think of one, he's passed away now, but he used to tell me weekly, son, I've been an agent longer than you've been on this earth. What do you got to tell me? And he was the guy, he would also complain almost weekly about this company taking his microfiche away. So that dates him a little bit.
Yeah.
But he just did not like the fact that we were taking his microfiche and wanted to use an AS400 or, the system. But being able to transition for that, you really have to have, in my opinion, a passion for leadership. Mm-hmm. You got to be a student of it. You cannot begin to even think about winging it. So what do you do to get yourself ramped up? You hire coaches, you read books, and today, like we said, it's so much easier to access those materials. Dial up, YouTube dial up, or you got mail dial up. Do you remember that?
I do.
So that was my era. Is like, we didn't have access to the content that's available today.
No.
So Jim Rohn used to always say, what's easy to do is easy not to do. Mm-hmm. So just because it's at your fingertips and easy to accept doesn't mean you will. So it all boils back down to, if you have a passion for literally anything, but if we're talking leadership, you'll figure it out. You'll learn how to lead. You'll learn how to interact with people. You'll learn how to communicate. I mean, John is like a master communicator, but there's a lot of really good communicators out there. And it really does boil down to, if I want to add value to you, I got to speak your language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been studying. Maxwell's probably one of the best. I mean, even listening to him the other day with Ed, and I'm going, Ed's kind of this next generation communicator,
Yeah.
and I study them. Is there anyone else that you're studying outside of Maxwell? You mentioned Jim Rohn, who I'm like, okay, guys, if you just hear these and you go study these guys, is there anyone else that's stood out to you lately that you're like, here's somebody's content, maybe not as widely known, but that you love?
Yeah, and you may think I'm biased, but my oldest son is probably one of the better communicators of today, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I will also be the most critical of him. So I feel like I'm somewhat qualified on that. But I've watched him morph into an actual leader over the last 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. He is a totally different person than he was, 5 years ago, a totally different person from 3 years ago. But the ability for him to read a room and to communicate and to deliver content is really, really good. He's got, his name's Taylor Welch. He's got a podcast that's recently started called The Deep End. And he's getting into a lot of deep end conversations around theology. Mm-hmm. And, some people love it, some absolutely hate it. But it's definitely creating some wonderful conversations.
So I'm glad you brought up Taylor, because obviously 3 boys, and he's probably the one I would just say, and hopefully it's okay. It's like, he's out there leading from the front, and I see some of the entrepreneurial stuff that he's doing and the companies he's built and speaking, and so many same people looking in and seeing his growth. Like you talked about the last 3 to 5 years. I love to ask the person that's probably close to him, what did you see that he did to make sure he grew into this next version, this newer version of himself? Because sometimes the people going through it, often they don't see all the stuff. They forget the things they did. What did you see?
I saw a tremendous work ethic, but being very, very coachable. All 3 of the boys are, they're 35, 32, and 30. And all 3 of them are just brilliant young men. Mm-hmm. It's like, are they perfect? Not even close.
None of us are.
And the interesting thing with Taylor, he wrote the foreword to my book. Mm-hmm. And, it's like when I get feedback on the book, it's, first of all, they're amazed that my son wrote the cover or the foreword to it. Yeah. And we have that kind of relationship. The adult relationships are they're gold. Yeah. We were talking earlier, you said you're sharing a story about, man, this is going to make me emotional. Talking about the relationship that we have with our sons, mm-hmm. adult sons, that they actually want to spend time with their dad. That's gold. So that, and then at the end of each chapter, there's implementation pieces. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 pieces of that give me more feedback. Mm-hmm. But to watch all 3 of the boys, but specifically to Taylor, a willingness to, at this point in his life, a willingness to be humble and learn and grow. Now, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the humility side wasn't quite there, and he'll probably challenge this, or he might agree at this point, but there is such a hunger for growth, mm-hmm. and that's driving everything that he does. He's a tremendous believer in coaching. Yeah. The amount of money he has spent and invested on personal coaches is just amazing. It's hard to be a coach if you don't have a coach. It's hard to have that credibility to want to coach someone else if you're not subservient to someone else.
That's right. Man, I love that. And when people are listening, hopefully they hear that, the coachability, the humbleness, and the eagerness there. I know in seasons of my life where I wasn't growing, I can quickly look back and go, man, I wasn't in a place to accept some of the feedback coming in. And some of the times that feedback is not always what we want to hear.
True. But
people close to us are like, hey man, I need to share this, or the things are happening. I always say the market's giving you some feedback. Are you willing to accept it? Hopefully they hear that and go, okay, that could be me. Make a decision to be humble. But let's jump in the book, because you mentioned this. Obviously Taylor wrote the foreword. I wrote down this piece, and I want to jump in because this to me was one of my favorite spots about the multi-generational transfer. Remember that section talking about values, vision, knowledge, wealth. And I love frameworks because my brain works and things. Like you said, at the end of every chapter, by the way, for everybody listening and you need to pick up your copy, is there actionable things that I'm going, some of this I'm doing, much of it I'm not, or I could do better. This one stuck out to me because whether I'm leading in our organization or a mortgage company, leading my family, leading a team, whatever it might be, talked about, I want to start at the values and like where all this framework even came from, but walk people through this a little bit.
Then that's the second. We talk about the legacy table, mm-hmm. right? I love where the even topic of legacy table came from. If I can share that,
please. Yeah.
My wife has always said it doesn't matter what our boys do, where they go, how they act, behave. They will always have a seat at our table. they are a Welch. And from that framework, it's like, how much time did we spend around the table? You know, and when I talk to some of my younger clients that are crazy busy, it's like, oh, you don't know my schedule. And I'm like, I may not, but we had 3 boys in sports, same night, 3 different fields, and we figured it out.
Yeah.
You know, so everyone's busy, right? So what do you do with it? It may not look like you've got time around the dinner table 6-7 nights a week. It may be once every other week. But just being intentional, that key word, being intentional to spend time around the table, there's so much that's gained around the table, whether it's a board game or dinner, it doesn't really matter. So the framework of they're always going to be welcome, have a seat at our table was
Love
really
that.
where that came from. And so from there, it's like there's 4 legs to a table. You know, so that's where vision, values, knowledge, which those 3, when they're done, it makes the transfer of wealth significantly easier. And I got to see that in the career that I had. Almost all the focus was put on just the wealth transfer. But if we go back to the values piece, the values is what determines the character of everything that we do. So there's a great exercise in the very back of the book. I mean, you can find it online, but the framework around this is it's really easy. It's easy to talk about. Identify your core values. Okay, done. Now what? Well, you go through the 150 values that's in the book, and it's the premise is you can pick those that, okay, this resonates with me. I can circle everything that resonates, maybe 40 or 50 first time you go through. Then the challenge is you cut it down to 20. That means you're knocking off some values that you already circled. Well, now I'm going to ask you to cut that in half to 10. Now you've knocked out 10 more that you really liked. Now I'm going to say cut it in half again to 5. So yeah, you have your 5, which wasn't easy to get to. And now if you're married, you have your wife do that, or your husband. Now you've got 5. My guess is 1 or 2 will be an overlap.
Yeah.
Which means you've got 8 or 9 unique values. And I'm going to ask you to try to merge those into one core value, a family value of 5 for the 2 of you. So it's one of those things, again, like Jim, it's easy to talk about, and the importance of having core values. They will then derive all the benefits or the behaviors that you want to see in your kids.
Yeah.
So the values is really, it's a second leg, because it's like without a vision, the people perish.
That's right.
But when you identify your values, now you can create the verbiage of what the vision is.
I love it. So I got to share a story with you on this. We're sharing it with our youngest, our 8-year-old, the other night. And loyalty is our first one. Like, that was one thing. Before we got married, we just said, like, this is the deal, right? Like, no matter, both of us are going to screw up. We're not going to be perfect and all this, but we believe we want to be married together until God calls us home, right? Like, however that. And we were sharing that with our 8-year-old about loyalty. He's like, explain that. It's like, what does that mean? And all. And it was such a cool conversation. So I share this with people as they're not too young. And we had this conversation that I don't think he grasped it at all. Like, in full transparency, I don't think he got it. But it was cool to hear Nicole share, here's what loyalty means to us. And I got to share, and our other son's there, and we're bringing that in. So I just invite people to have these conversations with your family, because your point, you might have your values, but your kids know them. Have you talked about them as they age? I thought it was just a cool moment, because I was thinking about, as I was prepping for this, I'm like, I have to share this with Lance, because that for us was such an important one that we want him to understand that. And we talked about sports to family to just loyalty in general as a friend.
Yeah.
And that's always been one for us that has been at the top.
Well, the fact that you had that conversation, you've just done what probably, I would guess, 98% of the families in America don't do. That doesn't mean they don't have value. Everyone operates from a value system.
Agreed.
But do they list them? Do they prioritize them? Do they communicate them? Because had you not had that conversation, then you're leaving to chance. Did he pick up on, oh, mom and dad are loyal, and that's a primary value for them? He's going to pick up things, right? But does he understand why that's so important? So kudos to you for even having that conversation.
Well, literally, I'll give you credit on it, because I tell those people, I read things and absorb from people that I want to learn from, and then I'm a quick implementer. I always say I'm not the smartest person in the room, but if I hear something or something like this, and so I always share these stories with people to go, I mean, here's like real life. Like, we always think it's going to be this magical moment. Like, we just happen to be sitting at the table, right? And so it was like this moment where I go, hold on. Lance has shared this, and it was a cool opportunity. And I will add this for people. Sometimes we'll grab words and we'll even ask Siri, or we'll pull up the dictionary version and go, hey, here's what the definition of it, but here's what it means to us.
That's good.
And so like we're going through this, and he's curious. And I found that to be something that's there. But let me jump back in, because you're about values. Vision is one my coaches worked on with me a lot. And one of my 5 strengths, I don't know, like futuristic. And so sometimes I go too far.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk about vision, because, there's no vision, the people perish and all this. What's the vision? Family, and then also leadership as you're leading teams. How can people get better at that skill?
Yeah, great question. Vision, and I think it's almost become cliche, which is a concern. Without a vision, people perish. Okay, what does that really mean? So from the dialogue perspective, is simply put, is if you don't have a vision, you're going to get off track. You might lose your way. You might forget where you're going. So how can we have those kind of conversations to where it's not this ethereal, high level, spiritual, theological, it's real life.
Yeah.
So without a vision, where are you going? What do you want to do? And then, there's so much talk about you have to become that person before you're able to implement some of those things. So what does that look like? So we can make it very, very complicated. But for me, from the basis of it is, what do you want? Where do you want to go? What kind of a time frame? And to your point, are we looking 10 years out? There's a lot that can change in 10 years. So I am a huge proponent of having a 10 or 20 year, but that's got to be held very, very loosely.
Yes.
The shorter you create your timeline, now you have to get much more what we call granular.
Yeah.
You can get down in the weeds on that, because what do you want to do next week? You got to be very detailed on that. What do you want to do by the end of 2029? Okay, that's going to be a little loose, looser. So from a vision perspective, it's clarity. I love that's a great word, by the way. I've been doing a lot of teaching on clarity, because once you get clarity on what you want and why you want it, it's amazing what you see with the energy. I mean, you could be talking to somebody with no clarity. I had a meeting this morning with a guy. Came in from my questions that I asked him. I sent out Sunday pre-week thoughts.
Yeah.
And it was challenging them to be ready to discuss these things. He came in and goes, I don't have an answer for this. He almost came in low energy, not quite defeated, but the energy wasn't there. By the time he left, he's like, I can't wait to get out, because now he has clarity. Clarity creates energy. It creates confidence. It creates courage. It gives direction. He now has a vision. Even if his vision's only for the next week, he knows where he's going. And there's just such power for that.
Don't you? That's what great coaches do. Like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to the coaches I've had the last 5 years that have been very intentional. Some were before that, but the last 5 years, people always ask, like, what do you coach with these people? What do you get out of it? And clarity, if I were to pick one thing, because you said clarity leads to confidence. When I leave some of these meetings, I do come in sometimes very similarly. I go, I am not clear. Like, I could go here, I could go here, I could go, I'm not sure. Talk to me about that from the coaching seat. You get to sit in and work with people. How can people start to create clarity? You said you had some questions you go through, maybe share some of those, but I think a lot of people operate. Even last week, Lance, I'm talking to people, high performers, by the way, in the mortgage industry. They don't have clarity even of this year of where they want to be. Now, some did.
Right.
They were in the top percent, but I found many did not.
Right.
So let's help them.
You just triggered some memory. We were talking about thoughts or phrases that trigger memories. I can remember speaking to our group. There's about 5,000 that earned this trip. So they were the top performers that made the trip. And even when I was preparing for that meeting, I knew from that group and just from studies and that 10% max would implement anything I talked about.
Wow.
And these are the cream of the crop. They are the top of the top. But I think people, they have a tendency to get complacent with their victories or their successes. Maybe they're not as hungry as they used to be. And, it's like we talk in our industries, we talk a lot about the financial success. That's only one part of it.
That's right.
It's like one of the questions, the third question that I asked everybody this last week, well, I'll just give you the three. What are your targets for 2024 business and professional? Create a list. Let's discuss. So that was number one. Secondly, scale of 1 to 10, how badly do you want these? If they're not an 8, 9, or 10, they're not a priority.
No.
They're not probably not going to happen. And then the third one was, how would you define success? What does success mean to you? The younger I was, it was all revolving around trips, qualifying, finances, the material things.
That's right.
Today, man, I can see something that one of the boys will post about something they learned, especially now with the oldest, he's got 2 kids.
Yeah.
The lessons he's learning now, it's funny. He'll call us. He's like, how did you guys do this? The first time he took his daughter to the beach, he called us from the beach. He goes, we only have 1. How did y'all do this? With 3. So it's amazing what they learn.
Yeah.
And the phrase, it doesn't matter till it matters to me.
Yes.
You've heard that. So I forgot what the question was. Oh, the 3 questions.
Yeah. Coaching through the clarity. And I love, you shared those 3, you asked them though, and I love defining success. And I'd love to build on that a little if you can, because this came up last week again. It's funny how these conversations come up as you're preparing, you're aware of them. That reticular activator they say is like, I see it now.
Right.
Successful people ask, and I would say same. It's like 10% probably could identify this is what success looks like. And 2 of the speakers actually went through, this is how I track success, this is what success looks like. But as I'm having conversations, I'd say 90% of the group probably felt the same. I'm not sure what success looks like anymore. It's all been about, this much production, this much income. I'm a producer. That's how we get graded and all of this. Right. Success was, I did not hear much on the personal side, which was
normal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, that's, if we tie it back to, the book and all those, the high net worth families that I got to work with, it was almost exclusively working with their advisors to build a wealth transfer plan that had enough legal documents in place that it restricted access to the wealth so that the children couldn't spin through it and burn through it. So I can't think of a single time where anything was discussed other than wealth transfer strategies and vehicles. They didn't talk about the vision, the values, and the knowledge. And so many times we would come across a patriarch, matriarch that had built multiple decades into building their business, but they held all of the information close to the vest. Yeah. They didn't talk about vision of the company so much, definitely didn't talk about values, and there was never a conversation about what have I learned that got us to where we are. So that third leg of transfer of knowledge is where I think about the movie Tommy Boy.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy was nowhere near ready to take over that company. Now, it was a movie, so it turned out well. The vast majority of the families that I worked with, I came in a lot of times on the back end when something had happened with one of the patriarch had passed. Now one of the children's going to take over the business, and they're expected to pick up where dad left off. And he's got 6 months to really learn everything that it took him 6 decades to learn.
Right.
And so that's where this intentional process of transferring all 3 of these things, and then, in the book we talk about the legacy retreat or the family vision cast. That's just an annual event that's so intentional. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. There's nothing in that book that I would say any family would look at this and say, "Oh, I don't get it.
Yeah, I can't do this.
I can't do this."
Yeah.
And but it's so simple to use and implement, and that's why it's set up the way it is each chapter just do something.
Yes.
Right.
I love that practicality too, because when you went through the table, I thought it did make me more aware of, we don't get every night with 3 kids, right. Sports, they're all going different directions. I feel you on that. And in the summer, we're all going lots of directions. And it's like, how do we, when we are at the table, be at the table? And I always hear this phrase of be where your feet are.
Yeah.
I'm also reminding myself, sharing that with the kids, it's like, put the electronics away. We're often guilty of that. And let's just be here. And it could be 15 minutes.
Right.
We're just around the table. But it's worth. What was one of the things as you wrote it maybe surprised you that has resonated with people that you thought maybe wouldn't be as good a lesson? You're like, that's what we do, but maybe people won't enjoy it as much. But it's turned out to be where you've gotten feedback of this was really impactful.
Well, the premise of the book morphed almost shortly after I wrote it or started writing it. When I didn't even want to write a book. That's what's funny.
I knew you told me that.
It was not on the radar. This was, so it was finished last year, January of that year. I remember Taylor's got a huge platform. And I told him, I said, you need to give me some referrals. Got starting to regrow the coaching business. And he goes, yeah, well, you need to give me some content. Now, what's interesting is when I share this, people are like, you have a relationship with your son that they can challenge you that way. So I've always said, when they were younger, I was dictator dad. I would say I was definitely too strong if I were to go back, but I was very, very directive. Then it turns over to maybe being the consultant side, and then it morphs into being more of a coach, and now it's an advocate, and then a friend. So we are in this stage where at 35, 32, and 30, it is so rewarding to get a call out of the blue, or the youngest one's really gotten into golf. You want to drive out for golf. It's inconvenient to drive out to where he is. But when you get a call from your adult son to go hang out for 4 hours, I'm not even a great golfer. Yeah. I make the trip, right. So that's what success is to me. The finances, that's fine. I mean, could I do better? Absolutely. Am I hungry to do better? Absolutely. Yeah. But that is not going to define my success. The legacy for me is now what we're leaving behind in the family name, and that these 3 boys, they are doing the family vision casts. They are doing the First Fridays. I don't know if I've talked to you about that part, but they're doing these things that they saw Allison and I do for the last 2 or 3 decades. Well, at least 2 decades. Yeah,
they could see it. Now they're doing it themselves.
They are.
And I love that transition you went through to where your journey is, because I think people, I see this often, they want to be the friend, early on, even in the teenage years. And we battled that a little bit. Like, we're not your friend.
Right.
We're your parents first, and we're going to be your biggest cheerleaders, but also we're the ones that are going to set you back straight. And I think people struggle with that. Will you walk back through that again? Because you shared that through like the stages and becoming an advocate, and then like how they can challenge you and all. I think that would be cool for people to hear in case they missed that.
Okay. Starts out, I just called it dictator dad. There's probably a better
we all started there at some point. Yeah.
But we'll call it very directive. I was incredibly directive. Then it moved into more of the consultant. Yeah. Then the coach. Then an advocate, then friend.
I love that. Yeah, that framework's gold. As I think through, ours are not there yet. I was 17, but I'm thinking I can see when that goes there. And then I watch, and study people that have kids that are older and go, what are they doing? What have they shared? They're like, man, I would have done this differently. And so, I share a lot with people, go, study the people that are further along in the areas that you want to be better in.
Yeah.
All right. Simple way. You're coaching now. You're telling me you got a couple spots opening up.
Yep.
Tell people a little bit. I want to plug that in, the coaching, who your ideal, customer client might be for that. So if people are listening, they're like, dude, I love this guy. Like maybe I would be a fit. Who would those people be?
Well, and I just realized I didn't really fully answer your question. If I can go back and answer that.
Please.
The premise of why I wrote the book changed. It started out with me just trying to create some content to give Taylor a reason to refer people to me instead of, hey, you need to work with my dad. No, here's his content if it resonates. And so that's where it started. I was going to write it on sales because I've started in sales in college, selling waterless cookware in China door to door.
Oh, wow.
Talk about getting some doors shut in your face.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to sales. Got no traction on that. Then I was like, well, I'm going to write it on leadership. I love leadership. John Maxwell, I've read enough of his books. I'll just take his content. No, I didn't. But I couldn't get any traction on that either. It wasn't until the topic of legacy surfaced that it's like, this is really what I've been about for the 35 years. That's my passion. And once I got to that, I had no real trouble getting words down. So that was really, and then it was about how can what I'm putting down on paper help other families, specifically dads, but I'm single moms. This is gold because if they don't have that dad in the house, this can help them give some direction. So it doesn't matter if you're married, single, if you're going to have children in the future. That's what this thing was written for, is to give people a track to run on, to create something intentional. Because I think right in the early part of the book, I said, you've got a legacy. Mm-hmm. You've either got an intentional one or the default one, but don't think you don't have something that you're leaving, right? So that's the whole premise of that. So it morphed from creating content for referrals to I want something that's going to be very easily implementable and impactful.
Man, and that's powerful. I remember reading that, and that hit me because people talk about you have a brand whether you like it or not. People, that was where my brain went, was like, being a branding, marketing guy and sales, I go, you have a legacy whether you do anything intentional about it or not. And so people listen, I go, take that to heart. Is your legacy aligned up with these values, vision, the knowledge, all these things? Are you creating a legacy, or are you just letting it happen?
Yeah.
And become another person that I say is like the bystander that goes, yeah, I wish I would have, and maybe my kids will get it right, you know.
The story of Max Jukes in the book.
Yes.
He had an amazing legacy, not one that name would be proud of.
Yeah.
Compared that to the Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, you know, there was a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah.
So whoever did that study, I forget the names of them, but that was a pretty good study between the two names.
It's eye-opening. And I love the fact you use stories. So we could tee the book up. I love people. I'm going to put this plug in, just say, if you haven't read it, you need to get it. We'll put a link in there and check it out. And thank you for letting me be part of it. Because I remember when I read it the first time, I'm like, this is different. This reads, because we read a lot of the leadership books. We read a lot of the things on sales. And I'm like, okay, it could be another book, you know, on this. I'm like, no, this is different. And the stories keep you active. And at the end of every chapter, point this out again for everybody's, the actionable things, that's what I want. Is like, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't want to just be inspired.
Right.
I need to go take some action. So it's pretty cool. Let's talk about this. You got a workshop coming up. You were telling me in September.
Yes.
Here. Let's talk about what that is, because I think people may want to plug in. They go, well, maybe coaching, I've got a coach, or maybe coaching's, you know, whatever their self-talk is at this point.
Right.
But you've got this cool workshop which caught my attention about the topics and who it's for.
Yeah. We did one in Cancun in April.
Yeah.
So that was good. Great location. We had some travel challenges. People didn't want to go overseas or whatever else. So this one is going to be here in Nashville. September 19th and 20th is the business portion. We've got some great speakers that are coming in. We have a focus on financial planning. We have a guy on delegation. So that workshop is really geared for entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite folks. So definitely leadership focus is what that's about. And that's on the 19th and 20th, full days. Saturday is going to be my favorite part. It's going to be solely focused on Family Vision Cast. Mm-hmm. So it's going to really still be geared to the people that come on Thursday, Friday, but there's plenty of people that either that isn't their focus, growing the business, maybe it's growing fine, but we're believing a lot of those are going to stay over.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday is going to be, how can you really be a business person that's actively growing a business, and we know how much time, energy, and effort that takes, but how can you do that and not have that at the expense of your family? And so that Family Vision Cast that's in the book, it's taken from when I was doing end of year reviews with all of my teams. And it was like, corporately, so many people spend so much time building their business plans. Mm-hmm. They review the prior year, what went right, what didn't, how do we forecast into the new year? But then they drop the ball. Not everybody, but they don't put that same level of energy into, what if we were to do the same thing for our families? What went well last year? The first time we did it, our boys were probably 12, 9, 7, somewhere in that range. So the 12-year-old, he was able to start setting goals, you know, sports goals, music goals, sure, grades, whatever. The 7-year-old was just running all over the room.
Yeah.
But we did that for about 15 years with them, to the point where they knew what to expect. You know, they were coming into this thing and it was a planned event.
Love it.
And you know, that kind of morphed into a lot of the content. So that's in the book. There are links in the book to be able to get that. But the thing on that Saturday is going to be really geared around, how do you intentionally build vision into and around your family so that it's mm-hmm. something that your kids, again, that has nothing to do with net worth. You could have a $10 net worth or $10 billion.
Yeah.
And it's about, how do you create vision in and for your family?
I love it. It's needed right now. And I just want to applaud you, because nobody is really stepping into this in the way in which I'm seeing you put the pieces together, the framework and your experience. Also says, like, God uniquely qualifies you through all these experiences you've been, now you get to go give these gifts out. I go, man, people, be there. So we're going to put the links in.
I appreciate that.
I would love to know this. What's something you've learned over the last maybe 6, 12 months new that you're like, this has been something that's a lesson I wish I'd known sooner, but that maybe God's teaching you, you've been reading, studying, and you're like, this is what I'm learning and going through right now?
probably it's going to be what is really, really important. What really matters. Back to that one question, how do you define success? We have all the measurements of what does corporate tell us is important.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those things, if you don't have a plan for your life, someone else will create one for you. So you get to decide what is really, really important. Been married 36 years. Have more value and appreciation for the price she's paid for our journey. She stayed at home for a good number of years. She was a school teacher initially. Then we homeschooled for a while. So, she's paid a heavy toll.
Yeah.
It's both of us have invested. Looking at the relationship we have with our boys, it doesn't matter. This is one thing I have learned. It doesn't matter how old they get. They will always appreciate dad pursuing a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. And they have worked as hard at this relationship as we have. So it's not one-sided. It's not anything that I can say, oh, look at what we've done. No, these young men have paid a big price. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the greatest lesson is really what matters.
Yeah.
Now that we have grandkids, those things are awesome.
Yeah, different chapter.
Totally different chapter. And pretty soon going to start, in there we talk about writing annual letters. Mm-hmm. So those are getting ready to start for the grandkids. So that's going to be a whole new chapter for us. You had asked, I think you'd asked, what would we do differently? Mm-hmm. Those are some great conversations I've had with Taylor over having kids, because there was definitely different things. And I think I mentioned in the book that I used to write an annual letter to them.
Yeah.
Because I was gone so much, I did not want to run the risk that if something happened to me on the road, that they didn't know what I stood for. They didn't know what was important. Now, where I encouraged him to do differently, and he is I tore up last year's letter and wrote a new one. Every year, I'd replace the old with the new. And so I told him, I said, man, if I had to do over, I'd just let all those letters pile up.
Yeah.
And on their 18th birthday or when they get married, you unload. Here's letters for the last 18 years.
Wow.
I wish I'd have done that, but it's interesting now. He's doing it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And I love you said pursue them. I think that'll stand out for people thinking, maybe they don't want to be time with me or they don't want this or that. Like, pursue them. It is a joint relationship, and pursue them. They're the people you love and care about. A
success story on that very topic. A real good friend of mine at our church, he went through the pre-read also.
Yeah.
And he said what really resonated with him was his training did not end when they turned 18.
Yeah.
And so he's got a 20-year-old, and he's like, he was a very intentional dad, an amazing dad. All of his focus, though, is put into let's get him out of school, make sure they're prepared to launch. He did everything that you and I would look at as correct, but he hadn't done the same level of intentionality with the adult children once they were out of the house and married.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that he pulled out of this is doesn't matter how old they get, he still has a responsibility to pursue and equip and encourage. He may just be their biggest cheerleader, and that's fine. Right. But it doesn't end when they're 18 out of high school or 22 out of college.
Yeah.
Never ends.
Hopefully everybody listening grabs that. Whether you have kids, don't have kids, grandkids, wherever you are, pursuing that. I'm blessed. My parents are still alive, and Dad turned 80. My mom's 77 and all that. Like, still have conversations, and they pursue. I'm always like, they check in. Hope we're not bothering me. Like, you're never bothering me.
Right.
Like, call anytime, and
Love it.
Those are things hopefully people take away. Well, we're going to put the links in there. Lance, this has been tremendous. This is a leadership masterclass. We're talking about all these different things that people, I think, put so much focus on the worldly success and what's out there. I'm going to make more money, more fame, and this brings you back. And what's so cool as I studied this is you do these things well, the success and all the other fulfillment comes.
Yeah, it's not either or.
No.
It's and both.
That's it. Beautiful lesson. Well, thank you, my friend. It's been awesome.
Having me. I appreciate it.
Guys, it's been another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge. I'm sure you can see why Lance has been so successful. Married for as long as he has, the 3 boys, how he talks about his relationship with them and pursuing them. I hope you caught that. And no matter what relationship you're in, what kids you have, you're going to have relationship with your team members, that you have a company and you get to lead people. If you're honored to do that, make sure you're pursuing them and bringing out the best in them. We also brought up something that I am passionate about, which is I believe everybody needs a great coach in their life. And so find that coach, whether that's Lance, someone else. Get in a relationship with somebody that's going to bring out things like clarity. We talked about confidence and the best in you so you can go be the best in the world. I believe, as I shared earlier, God's uniquely qualified you through all these experiences. You may look at them and go, it's not for me, I'm not qualified. And the reality is, that's why you're qualified, is everything you've been through to get to where you are. Someone is in your shoes from 5 and 10 years ago. They need your advice and help. And so hopefully that's provided you with some wisdom, roadmap, framework, all this we went through. This has been a fun one for me. Make sure you leave comments. Let us know how we did. If you need any follow-up support, I always say if you leave this and you're like, I need help, please ask. We'll respond to those. I love seeing the DMs and the questions. And if you would help us out on the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, comments, all that stuff that helps boost it up so we reach more people. That's the desire of this. Is we're not in this to make money, but we are in this to make an impact. And I've never shied away from that. Is I want more people to have the right information and what I believe is things that are going to make their life better so they can serve people where they are. So thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode.